It's going to be a hot button topic when we float that one. Give us some thumbs up if you want to hear Spinal Control.
Hold back.
Sounds like a rock song from
Spinal Control.
Spinal Tap. There we go.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Coaches on Couches.
Bing slouches.
Today
I didn't do the drum roll.
You didn't? Yeah, that was like you did the drum roll with your hands. But
boom.
Nobody's going to know on the podcast that you actually did a drum roll.
Might need to start this over.
So we're talking today about the biggest mistakes that we see from runners, both experienced and new runners. So I am Coach Dale Sanford.
I am Coach Bryant B. Funston.
I'm Coach Chris Winter.
We are your BPC coaches. BPC specializes in helping time-crunch athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching system that has been developed over the last decade through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels, from off the couch to the world championship competitor. You can find out more about us at buildpeakcompete.com, checking out Facebook and YouTube at Build Peak Compete, or Instagram at BPC Performance.
Excellent.
But first,
before we dive into big mistakes,
shout
them out. Who's leading off?
Y'all go. So we got to give a shout out to Nick and Bennett Isabella.
Mm-hmm.
We worked with Nick and Bennett over the years, and they went and ran the Sycamore Canyon 100K together as brothers.
There you go.
And they won it as brothers.
There you
Crossed
go.
the finish line hand in hand, and they actually set a course record.
Yeah, they're both fast.
They are both very fast, and they love running trails, so that helps. When I was chatting with them briefly afterwards, Bennett said that he let Nick take the win so he could get the prize money. And I said, Nick, well played. Bennett's buying tonight.
Exactly, right?
So, yeah.
The bargain was struck.
Yeah.
And or the deal.
The deal was done.
But it backfired.
Yeah.
So Nick gets the win, and he got free beer. I like it.
But I think I looked at the timing, and I think actually the timing system had Bennett.
Did it?
Yeah, like they crossed the
well played, Bennett.
Start line. Yeah.
So Bennett started behind it. Hey, there's a quick tip for you.
Yeah.
Start a little further back so you come across the timing map, or if you're doing some Strava KOM stuff.
Yeah, that's what you do. Yeah.
Start a little further behind.
Quick tip.
Just make sure you finish with the front. Bam, winner.
Psychological.
Winner.
What you got, Funson?
Mine is going to be Matt Mitchell. So we had Crosswinds Classic. I've actually got 2 today, but the first one, Crosswinds Classic, was this past weekend. Matt Mitchell is apparently not just good at plastic surgery, but also at riding a bicycle.
Yeah.
And he got away with 1 lap to go at Crosswinds, bridged up to the lone leader, and then beat him to the line. So he took the win for the team. It was a hard race for us. So another shout out to Crosswinds. So you delivered the win.
Delivered the win for sure.
You delivered it. You made all 3 of us on this couch suffer a little bit.
Every year.
Not a little, a lot.
And then I've got another one. I'm going to just dive straight into the next one. Hart Robinson, who was a regular on the shout outs last year. He's got some bigger races that he's doing this year, which having a pro license is very beneficial because it allows you to start in the front corral. Mm-hmm. And so he submitted for his pro license, and it was accepted based on his great results that he's had. So yeah,
that's awesome.
He's got himself a pro license now.
I'm telling you, man. Spending
Hashtag
some time
pro.
on this couch.
Hashtag pro.
Spending this little time on this couch.
Mm-hmm.
I got a shout out.
Shout out.
William Hennessy.
There you go.
Won 25K trail race over in Arkansas. I don't know why the name of that race is escaping.
We shouted out to him last week.
You shouted out? Oh, okay, I wasn't here then.
Yeah. Chris apparently isn't watching the live.
No,
you really should watch this.
And shout out to Stitch, the headless dog over here.
We had to keep the dog in the room, otherwise she loses her mind.
Mm-hmm. She got some love though on Facebook last.
She did. Everybody apparently loves Stitch.
Yep. So thumbs up if you like dogs on couches.
I'd like to shout out to anybody who has offered up some feedback or review or anything on the podcast. We've been, so you see, we've made some tweaks to the set.
Signage.
We look like we're.
So Dale couldn't stand there being shadows back there, so he took it as life mission to try to remove shadows, and now it looks like we're at a sweet club or something.
We are. We can change the color too. I don't know the remote, but we could get this party started.
Party started. All right. So for all the people that cannot see what the heck we're talking about and are here for some actual content, let's go ahead and start diving into this. So we wanted to take some time on this podcast and live Facebook feed, obviously, to talk a little bit about some of the biggest mistakes that we see with the running community. Now, some of this actually translates over to all sports, but we're going to focus a little more on the biggest running mistakes that we see and offer corrections on how to actually either avoid that, or if that's something you're doing, how to cure it. So let's just kind of dive right in it. We're going to kind of run through this list of things, and let's just get rocking and rolling. So one of the first ones, a pacing related issue.
Yeah. These are in no particular order.
Yeah.
And for some of them, just knowing that this is a problem is your fix. It's the avoidance
awareness,
factor. The awareness is the fix. So I would say one of the major ones is just starting off races too fast or too slow. I mean, we probably see it more commonly with newer runners, but there are like the highly competitive crowd that just cannot handle themselves, and every time they get to a start line, the first like quarter mile is just blocks.
Guns blazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's called adrenaline, right?
Yeah.
You got the adrenaline, you got freshness in the body, so there's no fatigue that's built up, and so it's very easy with the excitement of all of that to not have the legs or the lungs telling you how fast or hard you're going until it's a little too late.
So Chris, what is your main tip on pacing off of the start line?
It depends on if you're starting off too fast or too slow. One simple fix is if you're starting off too quick is just to start in a slower corral group. So don't be right at the starting line because if you are, then you're physically free to go as quick as you want. If you're back further in the corral, then you'll have a lot more people in front of you, so you'll have to slow down. It'll force you to. And, the other way around, if you're starting off too slow, move up a little bit in the starting corral. That'll help get people out of your way. You'll have an easier way to navigate, the path on the road. So that's one way. Another thing too, and this kind of ties into warm up too, but is, if you are warming up and you're still starting off too quick, maybe do like a 2 to 3 minute, not all out, but harder effort that ends about 10 to 15 minutes before your race starts. So it doesn't zap you, but mentally you're thinking, okay, I have a 2 to 3 minute effort running in my legs. You're not going to be as tempted to start off as quick.
And how much of this goes into actually doing pace work?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it's pace oriented work. Like if you're it depends if you're the race you're training for, if it's your goal race and you've done a lot of race pace work in the final 4 to 6 weeks leading up to it. Once the gun goes off, your body will want to run that speed if you've practiced race pace. So if your goal is to do a 3-hour marathon or under that, usually it paces right around, 6:55 to 7 minutes per mile. So if a lot of your race pace work is that, then when the gun goes off, your body will just want to do that.
Naturally goes into it.
Yeah, I typically see people start off faster in shorter distance races. They start off faster than they should in like 5Ks or 10Ks, sometimes halves, and they start off too slow. A lot of times I've seen in marathons because there's more time to make up.
Yeah.
So,
My tip here is don't trust any 8 to 11-year-old on the start line. If you think that they're going to win, they're guns blazing. They have one thought, and that is to be the first, in the front after 10 yards.
Yep. They're the epitome
and then they're
of high
done.
intensity
Don't
interval
get me wrong.
training.
There are some fast 8 to 11-year-olds
Yeah.
out there. They just kind of that age. They haven't really learned pacing yet. So
I feel good. I'm running fast
Shout
now.
out to my my wife's first ever 5K she did,
Oh, yeah?
and she's like, I'm pretty sure there was a little kid that was just pacing himself off me, and he would like sprint past me and then walk, and as soon as I caught him, he'd like sprint past me again, and eventually he nipped her at the line. And I was like, oh, he must have been 8 years old.
Oh man.
That's a great tip.
But learning your
Yeah.
pace can be a huge
Yeah.
thing. Learning
Yeah.
what pace you can hold, you can handle. We always say trust your training, which essentially comes down to number one, having the confidence, knowing that you've done the work leading
Yeah.
into a race. But the other thing is you know what you're capable of.
Right.
And sometimes there's these massive breakthrough performances, but for the most part, you should have a pretty good feel for what you can and cannot handle, and that's kind of a huge thing there.
Yeah, workouts will indicate that too. Like the last thing I would recommend doing, or not the last thing, but one thing I would recommend doing, and it might be the last thing in your training, is about 10 days out. If you're eyeballing a 5K, and your training's going well, and about 10 days out, do a 2 to 2.5 mile, race pace effort to see if your goal,
Like a goal race
yeah,
pace.
is like a goal race pace at a slightly shorter distance to see. And if that should feel fairly easy. And if it does, then stick to your race pace plan for pacing. If it doesn't, then you might have to modify your effort. But
All right, so you mentioned the warm up.
Right.
Let's go ahead and kind of get into that a little bit more. What are the mistakes we're seeing with the warm up? Issues that people may have. We'll just dive up to warm up or lack thereof, just in general here.
What I see people do is not do a warm up a lot, and I guess it just depends. If you're somebody that just is signed up at the last second and you're not competitive and you're not really too worried about it, then you just start the race and you start the race. But for people that we coach, what I see is they either do too short of a warm up or too long of a warm up, and I don't know, people that I have seen, they also get caught up in doing what other people are doing before warm-ups and not knowing why. So like a lot of things I would see in cross-country coaching in high school at all different levels in high school was, you see kids doing strides, right before the race starts. They're out there and they're sprinting as fast as they can for 20 seconds and then sprinting back and then sprinting out and sprinting back. And then 2 minutes later, the gun goes off, and I mean, it's great to do it, but you got to know why you're doing it.
Got to have the why.
And so when I've asked people, well, why are you doing that for your warm-up? They don't really know, so.
Because he was doing it. The person next to me did it.
Our main suggestion there is always an active dynamic warm up, and hitting those warm ups with 10 minutes to start time ish. Enough time to get lined up, let the nerves calm. You can do a few more active movements while you're standing there, but like you said, you don't want to go even a short effort. You don't want to go all out and then line up on the line and have to do that again.
Yeah.
Because obviously, there's a lot of times, even just the first 20 meters of a race is going to be pretty fast.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a competitive person, races, even though you shouldn't be pacing the first part really hard, the first 50 meters is always a sprint to kind of get position and get get yourself settled in. But doing those active dynamic warm-ups prior to is always more beneficial because you are actually increasing the elastic capability of the muscles, and you're not. So when you sit there and you static stretch and you haven't properly kind of warmed up the muscles, it's kind of like, I always use the analogy, it's like trying to like manipulate a frozen turkey. Like you're not going to get much out of that.
Take yourself back to November, people.
Yeah.
Go back to Thanksgiving time.
Yeah.
And that frozen turkey you had.
Not real easy to manipulate. But once you get warmed up, those muscles will actually stretch out and elongate optimally while maintaining that elastic recoil of the muscles, which is what we teach.
So you just talked about static stretching and our active dynamic warm up. What would be your 1 minute? This is how you do an active dynamic warm up.
It really boils down to just getting your heart rate up, and then doing some dynamic exercises, dynamic movements, starting from the top down with the shoulders, working into your core, working into your hips and glutes and hamstrings and quads, and then even lower leg, ankles, and feet. When I'm talking about active exercises, I mean like squats, lateral squats, heel toe raises,
Exactly.
arm swings, stuff that's not sitting in one spot. You're moving, coordinated movements that are going to help the brain communicate with the muscles. That's the kind of thing that you're doing in an active warm-up that is going to allow you to start at pace.
Exactly.
And not have to take that first quarter, 800 meters or whatever to get up to speed and build up to speed. And then, on a shorter race, that's losing time if you're not able to start at pace.
Yeah.
Or the pace that you want based on your plan. Mm-hmm. The active and dynamic warm-up allows you to get there right off the start.
So let's, great rundown there. And we actually have on our YouTube channel, we've got an active dynamic warm-up up there if anyone wants to search it and find it. You mentioned squats. I think there's probably going to be a lot of people that heard doing a squat in a warm-up, and they're so scared of just doing squats in general for how that makes their legs feel, which kind of rolls into our next topic to talk about here, strength work. What are the mistakes we're seeing there?
Massive mistake is avoiding strength work. I always tell people, strength work is it's durability. If nothing else, it is going to prepare your body to take the pounding of whatever mileage that you're doing. On top of that, strength work allows you to hold form longer. Mm-hmm. We can preach injury prevention. It does that. Strength work isn't going to prevent every injury. Yep. You can do a lot of other dumb things to hurt yourself. But strength work really is that durability. It's your longevity in the sport. And it's going to allow you to hold form longer. And if nothing else, it keeps all those muscles activated so that they can contribute in the workload where they're supposed to. The biggest thing we see obviously from endurance athletes is shut down glutes, really, really, really weak core. And I know we talked about this the other day. I could do an entire podcast on the lack of spinal control in endurance athletes.
It's going to be a hot button topic when we float that one. Give us some thumbs up if you want to hear spinal control.
Hold back.
Sounds like a rock song from
Spinal Control.
Spinal Tap. There we go.
But they as a triathlete, to me, I say to myself, if you're just running, you've got time to put strength work into your program. So don't avoid it. Don't think it's just going to make you sore and ruin your runs. You've got to progress it in, but it has to be there, especially the older you get. For people who've just been doing miles and miles and miles, if you've plateaued, I listened to a podcast yesterday by Matt Dixon, really well-known endurance coach, and he did a whole podcast on strength training for endurance athletes and brought up a bunch of case studies. And one case study was basically the typical, I've been training for years, have a ton of miles in my legs, just love running miles. And for the last couple of years, I've been flat as can be. And he took this woman and basically made her only do intensity and strength work. And she was still running faster in marathons than she had ever ran, with very little to no actual endurance running, because she has banked all those years of miles.
Right.
Your
fatigue resistance isn't her issue.
Right.
Yeah. Her body knows how to run that pace. It doesn't know how to run quicker.
Yeah. So don't avoid strength work, please. Don't.
Yeah, the worst thing I've seen runners do, is just run. That is the absolute worst thing. When I coach kids that just love the sport, or when I was fitting people for shoes, they would talk about what's going on and how can I, it'd come up that I was a running coach as well. And, what can I do to get better? And I'm running this, and this, and doing this for workouts. And I'd be like, well, are you doing any strength work? And inevitably they'd say no. I would say 9 out of 10 people out there
it's a major hole in a lot of people's.
And one way to really correct it is, there's no real difference in my opinion, between a 60-minute run and a 50-minute run. So if you got a 60-minute run on your schedule, stop at 50 minutes. And if it's an easy run, if it hadn't been too intense, add in some strength work at the end of it. You know, you don't have to, the excuse of I don't have time really doesn't muster, you know, because I mean, you can manipulate your training program to fit it in.
Our like general suggestion for people is, you know, 2 to 3 sessions of 45 minutes. Now you can take that total of an hour and a half, you know, of 2 sessions and break that into 15 to 20 minute blocks. And now you can pop those in the beginning, like you said, beginning or end of other training sessions.
Right.
And you're still getting the total, the right amount of strength work and targeting those muscles that are really going to help improve your running. You just didn't have to go into do a specific session for those exercises. You can break it up. It's not a big deal. Just do it.
Exactly. And this sort of goes back to that dynamic warm-up as well. You can add strength building. The first time we take people through an active dynamic warm-up, if they haven't done it before, there's a lot of folks where that takes a lot out of them, just because they're not used to the movement pattern and those muscles having to actually fire over a larger range of motion. Yeah. So just working some strength building stuff into your warm-up as well as an easy fix. You know, is that the greatest thing? You know, is that better than doing a 45-minute very structured strength training session? You know, no. But is it better than not doing anything at all?
Yeah.
Of course not.
Yeah.
So,
and as you add in those 15 to 20-minute sessions, you can build up to a 45-minute section. I mean, that's what I would advise. You know, you don't want to stick with just 10 minutes at a time. Eventually, you want to work it into the 45-minute blocks. But it's a good way for beginner strength athletes who haven't done it to kind of get going.
So we kind of touched on 2 different things as part of that. We mentioned injuries. You know, strength training is, you know, it's not going to prevent injuries, but it could be something that, helps reduce the risk of injury. And we also talked about the people who just like to run and run and run and run and run some more. So they're stacking on some big mileage. For some, especially beginners, that too much too soon thing can happen. Injuries can occur, people running through injuries. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit more, kind of break that down. You know, the too much too soon, the running through injuries, how do we help prevent that? And let's just kind of dive into those 2 things real quick.
Yeah, I mean, too much too soon is a very common thing. Like I would say, the too much too soon for new runners is very common, but I would say just because of the population that we tend to coach, the too much too soon comes in the realm of getting back to it too quickly, or they take take the off season to go really easy, and they say to themselves, well, I've done 40-mile weeks before, I've done this and that and the other, I've been at this level before. I can get back there in 2 weeks.
I've run these paces before.
So it's not necessarily that they're just like, it's not the progression. It's not necessarily progression of overall miles, but the entire training load for them based on what they've been doing for the last, I don't know, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks is, it's just too much too soon for them. So like, Chris, do you have any major examples of other too much too soon?
I mean, one of the best examples and I hate to say it, was myself from last summer. I've been coaching for a long time and running for longer, and I wanted to do the M-Town series, and the first race was the Zoom Through the Zoo, 4-miler, and I hadn't been running much at all. I'd been biking a whole lot, but I knew the paces that I could maintain just through a few race pace runs I did a couple weeks before the event. And at about the 3-mile point, my hamstring I just felt it. It didn't pop, I didn't tear it, but it was a serious strain. And I mean, I finished, but I probably should have stopped running the race at that point. And so for me, the too much too soon was it related to intensity, trying to go too fast too soon. I mean, I could definitely go out and run 4 miles at a little slower pace and been fine, but it was trying to go too fast too soon without having put the mileage in on the legs. I think, for people like me that kind of flop from between running and biking, cycling unless you crash, you're not hitting the pavement, with your body. And so you're not used to that force impact. And running, you're hitting the ground, a whole lot. Even in a 5K, you're taking thousands of strides, and that causes a lot more trauma in different ways than just biking. And so you have to be sensitive when you're jumping back into running, and pay attention to your intensity and your volume. As volume increases, your intensity typically decreases in running, and so as your intensity goes up, your volume goes down a little bit in training. So
yeah, so my big recommendation here for those listening, if you're new to running, just make sure you're progressing your mileage gradually, and not trying to rush in. The worst thing you can do is you find out that you signed up for a half marathon and you're 5 weeks out, and now you're cramming for the test. That's not where you want to be.
Your body cannot cram for a test.
No. So for those of you who are competitive, like yourself, and your brain is always there. Your brain's always I could do this, no biggie.
Yeah.
Progress the intensity more than the volume. So, work in, as you're bringing your volume back up, work in strides and just get the muscles firing quickly first, for short periods of time. And then you can kind of go into more what we call low volume speed. So you're just doing maybe 6 400s and just getting the body used to it with a lot of recovery between. Mm-hmm. And then once you kind of gone through maybe, 4 weeks or so of that, build up with the low volume speed and the strides, then you can get into doing more serious race pace track workouts or VO2 max stuff. Because otherwise you risk, I've been there myself. I've been just running volume basically over the winter, and then all of a sudden I'm well, I need to do some speed work because I haven't done it in a while. And then you try to go smash out, some VO2 max 400s or 800s, and you crush yourself. You crush yourself for days, and if you're not smart about it, you're going to hurt yourself.
Right.
So,
I would think that, through a base period of training, 2 to 3 times a week, maybe 2 would be better, but sprinkle in some faster, shorter efforts at the end of easy runs, 4 by 15 seconds, or just a few things like that, to where your brain and neuromuscular connection, it's still there with your legs, so that when it comes time to transition from your base to that, that more competitive and peaking phase of your training, your body can call on those muscles to do it. The biggest problem is just going straight from, okay, I'm running a bunch of mileage at an easy pace to, all right, I'm going to go out and do, 4 sets of 800 meters all out. I would never advise that. You always want to give your body the ability to adapt over time so that, you don't get injured.
So this kind of rolls pretty well into one of the other big mistakes that we see, and that is never actually learning to run fast.
Exactly. Yeah.
It is probably, a lot of the runners that come to us, they've done track workouts and stuff like that. Obviously we were talking before, speed is relative. Speed workouts are relative to what you're training for. But you never actually have taken the time to learn the skill of running fast. And what we're talking about here is learning how to develop your stride length or your stride rate, or just your mechanics in general. You're just running efficiently. And that stuff pays off dividends over the long haul. And it gets harder. It gets harder to do it. The more chronological, your chronological athlete age, the older you are in your athlete age, the harder it is for you to make changes in these things.
Yeah, you've ingrained habits, essentially, yeah.
So we will do a shameless plug here, and that is we actually are doing a stride rate and stride frequency running clinic at the Schilling Farms YMCA if you're local in the Memphis area. Speed Skills Run Workshop, March 30th at 8 a.m. at the Schilling Farms YMCA. And you can get all the information on that. We'll put it in the notes here, and then you can check that out on Facebook and our website. And so in that clinic, we are actually going to we're not just going to run people through the drills and say, have a good day. We're going to teach them kind of the progression of how we would progress those drills in developing stride length and stride frequency so that you can continue the work afterwards and really allow those adaptions to set in. Because realistically, what we hope you get out of the clinic is you can feel what it's like to run fast, and then you take those drills and continue to develop that. If you don't do anything with it beyond the clinic, I'm sorry, you're not going to get faster. I mean, it's just these are habits and movements that you're trying to change, and it takes more than obviously one go at it. So
well, and that's also a big mistake that I think a lot of people make is they don't. And we're going to dive into the easy runs being too hard, but easy runs are a great opportunity to be working through the mechanics, the technique stuff, learning what it feels like to have that proper leg turnover. So athletes never taking the opportunity to actually scale things back a little bit, making easy runs easier, having dedicated technique days, and actually learning the proper technique to move faster, I think would fall into that mistake category as well.
Mechanics in general, mechanics work in general is speed skills. Like if we, like on the front end of many programs that we create, like if we're diving deeper into the cycles, I use speed skills as a cycle early on for a lot of different athletes because I want them to take some time and learn how to run more efficiently and turn their legs over faster and utilize their posterior chain to increase your stride length and all that stuff. And you see some really incredible benefits from it. I don't know, we've shout out to John Zinn several times, and he's training for Gulf Coast 70.3, but we're spending this whole front edge working on his mechanics. And, he just sent me another text the other day where he ran the exact same route that he ran in September. He ran it 2 days ago, and he ran it like almost 20 minutes faster. Yeah, I know. It's like a 9-mile course. He ran it like 20 minutes faster, and that was the longest run he's done in months.
Yeah.
So, it just goes to show that if you work on the mechanical side of things, you're going to get the benefits that you're looking for without actually having to do like a ton of like hard intervals or hill repeats or stuff like that. I mean, it is totally worth your time to work on this stuff.
Just really quick, not something we had written down, but from a technique standpoint, what do you see as athletes making the bigger, or runners making the bigger mistake with? Is it a stride rate thing, or or length, or is it a frequency thing?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and I'll answer that, but it's a lot of it. The first thing I see is their arm mechanics are off, and so like when I see that their arm mechanics are off, that also is going to tell me that
off as in how.
Like running like jolly joggers, like crisp, like their arms are crossing the midline of their arms are flailing. Yeah. They're holding their wrists too tight, or they're holding their wrists too loose. Their
hands are low.
Hands are low. Yeah. Hands are too high. Shoulders are tight. And so that that right there tells me, okay, if we fix that, then that can help. That leads into their stride frequency
for sure.
And how many times they're moving their legs.
Yeah, it's really hard to move your legs any slower or faster than your arms are moving. If you haven't figured that out.
Metronome, right?
Yeah, they're in sync. So
it's funny to try to do it too.
It is. It's hard.
Yeah.
So if your arm movements are slow because your arms are way too long and you're holding them down by your waist or whatever, your legs are going to move that slow.
Yeah.
Arm movements are a huge thing, and then just posture in general. People just run slumped over, and
they're not standing tall.
Yeah, they're not. Their core is totally inactive in their running. It could be strength, but for a lot of people, it's just cueing them to stand up straight and
run tall, right?
Yeah, keep their line of sight. I see all the time people looking straight up when they run or looking down at the ground. Your body follows your head. So if you look straight up, you're going to stand way too tall, and your hips are going to come forward. And if you look straight down, your butt's going to fall out, and your feet are going to start to land out in front of your body. So there's a lot of just things you can change from the waist up that affect from the waist down, and it's just a simple fix. But it's totally worth your time.
Yeah, sure. And I like just real quick, I think the thing to answer your question is like there's a misconception of what stride is. Like either kids I'm working with, their parents will tell me, their stride is, they need to make their stride longer. And so I'll ask the kid, okay, well, what do you think, or an adult, what's your stride? And they'll be like, what's how far apart my feet are? And that's not right. So I think a lot of it is just misconceptions about what the terms actually mean. Like what is stride? Why is increasing your cadence beneficial to your running? So, and how do those tie in together? So just understanding the terms and come to the clinic at Schilling Farm,
Yeah, I mean,
shameless shout out. But seriously, like knowing what the words mean helps you understand how to apply them to your running. And like Dale said, you won't have to go out and do, 15 hill reps or, 800s to get quicker. Even if you're chasing some microseconds or smaller amounts of time, you can make some form adjustments over time, and it'll help you.
That's huge.
I mean, to kind of go back and answer Brian's question, it's not really, when you ask about stride rate and stride frequency, the big answer is it depends. It depends on the athlete, and I've seen people have really great turnover, and it just comes down to they're just not covering a lot of ground, or they're bouncing up and down too much. Yeah. And then there's people that have really slow leg turnover, but their stride length is good, and there is no, like everybody says, it's the magic 90 RPM number. There's no magic number. It just so happens that when you turn your legs over a little bit quicker, your running economy is generally better. But there's not like a magic 90 RPM. That's just where it just so happens to where a lot of people fall into when they're running fairly efficiently.
Elite level folks.
Yeah, if you look at more elite level folks, their stride rate for a 1,500 meter in the mile 5K is the same then as it would be when they're doing an easy run. Yeah. It doesn't change. It's the distance and the force they're applying to move forward that changes at that point. So
yeah.
All right, so let's transition from there. We dove into that one. We got the shameless plug, obviously, but technique is huge, and it's a big thing that helps you improve your speed. We've alluded to mileage, so doing too much too soon. We've talked about some volume and intensity stuff. So weekly mileage, I know a lot of people, runners, will be like, okay, I got to hit X amount of miles, or what mileage are you running? Would you guys advise basing your running on the mileage number?
I would advise awareness, but not obsession with it. You need to be aware of what's effective. So, I don't think it's the most important aspect to a runner's training is sticking to a specific weekly mileage plan, because running and training is a process of discovery. So, you're going to find out what works for you and what works for you at different parts in your training. When you get older, you might not be able to handle as much mileage, so you can't run 50 miles a week. You might have to do 30, but that's effective. So I would say that if you're obsessed with your mileage and you're counting it constantly, and you're looking and that's an issue, and you're itching for ways to stop, one way to do it, and this kind of applies to a few other things, is that we'll get into maybe in a bit, is take off your watch and look, and don't run
No,
with the
Chris,
watch.
I am not taking off my watch.
Don't worry about it.
It doesn't count.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know how far your routes are anyways. If you're a runner, you're used to running the same routes most days, so you know it. So just don't use your watch for a week and see that that's okay. You're not going to die. You'll be able to handle the training, and it gives your brain it'll force your brain to think about things differently. You'll pay attention to sensory data, how hard you're breathing, how much you're sweating, when your arms start burning, where's the wind coming from, things like that. So
I personally don't, here's my take there's two populations, the newer runner and the more experienced kind of competitive runner. And I would think, and personally for new runners, I don't think there should be a you shouldn't be worried about mileage at all. It's more of a time thing. Like, focus on the time you're on your feet, because the route that you take and everything else determines what the actual workload of that run is. So if you give them a 6-mile run on a flat course and a 6-mile run on a really hilly course, that is 2 different training loads on that person. So for somebody who needs to be progressed more slowly, if you give them things based on mileage, you're risking overdoing it for them. Whereas if you're focused on the time over a hillier course, they're going to be slower. So they may not cover as much distance over a hillier course, but all in all, the training load is going to be fairly equal. So with the other population, with the more competitive person, you can focus more on mileage. Obviously, it doesn't need to be like, we've got to get 40 miles, 50 miles in this week. For some people doing ultra marathon and stuff like that, obviously weekly mileage is a little bit more important. But again, that terrain that you run is going to determine how much time you're out there.
Yeah. Right. When we start talking about training load, like the load that is being placed upon the body, mileage isn't necessarily, this is what I'm getting from you here, is mileage isn't generally the best indicator of what that load may be.
No, because you could, take for example a race that most runners want to qualify for, maybe Boston. Well, it's downhill 13, 14, 15 miles, and then you hit some bigger hills. They're not killer, but where they are in the race is important, and then you go downhill again. And if all you're doing is practicing on flat courses and you're running, I'm running my weekly mileage, I feel ready, your body isn't used to the load that's going to be applied to it at that specific race because of the course. And so your quads are just going to feel this shock like they never have before when you hit the first series of hills. And so, focus on weekly mileage, it can take away from focusing on other things that are important too, like knowing the course and understanding
specifics of the race.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
and I think that also kind of dives into the next part. People, the gray zone of training, as it's often referred to as, doing the easy runs way too hard. I think that's a trap that people kind of fall into. If you are thinking about mileage, maybe you didn't get quite as much in on your longer run day, so now you're trying to get your mileage back up on your easier day. Is that something you guys are seeing a lot? Going too hard on easy days, overrunning easy days, doing too much mileage all the time. What are mistakes you're seing there?
I see it a lot from triathletes because you're doing so fewer runs than you would do if you're just training for a run race. So they get in their head that they have to run hard for every run to keep some mileage up, but what you're doing is you're sacrificing quality somewhere. If you're just going to run hard all the time, the hard workouts are not going to be hard enough. Or as in the case of a triathlete, you're going to sacrifice what you could be doing on a hard workout for the sport that you're weakest at, because you love to run and you're running too hard all the freaking time. And you won't back it down enough to actually put quality into those other sports that you're weakest at. So yeah, I think it's a huge mistake that runners in general make, is just, they know they can run this pace, and if they run slower, it's it's not helpful to them. They're not going to gain anything from it. Yeah. But if they run faster, they're getting farther. They're going to burn more calories or whatever whatever they have in their head. But if you're really looking to improve, you've got to make the quality days super quality, and then just not even worry about. That's what you're talking about. Get rid of the watch.
Yeah. On easy
days, cover it up.
Yeah.
You don't get rid of it. Let's not get crazy, Chris.
We still want that data, man. We still want that data.
But you could, turn it around. Sometimes I'll turn it on, put a
piece of duct tape on top of it or something.
Yeah.
Or just be disciplined enough not to look at it, which we all know is impossible.
That's impossible.
I'm the worst about it.
This is something I think that goes, Dale mentioned triathletes, runners are guilty of it, cyclists are guilty of it. I think we're all guilty of always thinking like, if I'm going easy, I'm not benefiting.
Well, especially for time crunch athletes.
Exactly.
Like, you have limited time, so you think that you have to go hard on every workout and get the most out of every workout. But that's just not how physiology works.
And this is where, kind of going back into what we talked about, it's a great opportunity to focus on another aspect, more fundamental style stuff, your technique, your efficiency, your mechanics. Those easy days, you mentally can probably wrap your head around a little better if you've got a focus for it that's not intensity related, but it's instead, a body mechanics or an efficiency or a technique thing.
Yeah, and I would advise you, if you're out there, you're listening to this or watching this on Facebook, if you're trying to get faster and you're wondering why you're not, if what you're doing isn't working, change it. And change something. And if one of the things you're doing is, and you know it, and most people are aware of it, is if you're running your easy days too hard, you're aware of it. Like every runner I talk to, whether it's a family member or a friend or somebody I'm coaching, or I'm reevaluating and reflecting on my own running, is I probably ran that a little too hard, but I felt good, so I just wanted to go. Well, let your body feel good then, so it can feel good on race day, because you have to adapt.
Better, right?
Yeah, you have to adapt to it. So, if what you're doing is not working, change something. And the easy run is the easiest thing. Is the easiest thing to change, because you don't have to try to go harder, you have to try to go slower.
Yeah, exactly right.
And
that's a great opportunity to, from like a cycling standpoint, what I've encouraged my athletes to do is find, a person who is at maybe not as fast of a level as you, or go on a slower group ride, something that is a controlled pace, but a lot slower than what you usually would. You still get the social aspect of it. It's a great opportunity for you to meet new people, possibly offer advice and help new people out, but it's a way to kind of control your pace. But only do that if you actually will maintain the slow pace.
Don't drag everybody.
We're going to shift gears a little bit. Shoes. So Coach Chris, worked at a running store for a decent amount of time. Shoe-related questions here. What are mistakes you're seeing as far as shoes are concerned in general amongst the running group?
Just in no particular order, people running too long in the same pair of shoes. People picking shoes out because they're that's a fad or a trend.
Color, right?
Color is really important. Runners picking shoes out because their friends recommended, hey, I have this shoe, so come get it. Yeah. And the reality is that it's like Dale said before, it just depends. It really depends on how you run, what your foot does upon impact with the ground, how strong you are, how experienced you are as a runner. I've seen lots of people that aren't racers necessarily, and self-admitted racers, want to get racing flats because they just see that as it's appealing. The advertising for that shoe and the marketing for that shoe has worked on them.
Sounds
so
fast to me.
Yeah, it sounds fast. Or like, you see people want to get the shoe that the world record marathoner ran in because, well, he ran in it, I should do it. Yeah. And that's marketing and advertising working on you. And I'm not saying it's a bad shoe. I've run in it. It's a fine shoe. But I would recommend making sure that you don't have a ridiculous amount of mileage on your shoes, and that being somewhere within the range of 300 to 500 miles for your shoes, running shoes. That you probably need to get new ones if you're over that. If you're in that range, it's a good idea to start thinking about it. And if you don't know, then visit your local running shop and ask them, hey, what do you think about this shoe? Does it feel like it's dead? Does it feel like the foam isn't responsive? They should be able to tell you.
Now, you mentioned the quick test that you will sometimes do.
Yeah.
Go ahead and explain that one.
So like a test, and if it's your own shoe, great. You probably don't need to put a pair of gloves on, but if it's somebody else's shoe.
We're not telling you to go steal other people's shoes here.
No, you might want. Yeah, so what you can do is you take your shoe, and if you can fold it in half, like this way, toe to heel, and it folds real easy, very easily, like a piece of paper. And if you can take it and fold it in half like a taco pretty easily, as easy, almost as a piece of paper, right around that effort level, then you probably need new shoes. If the foam is degenerated, it's not responsive, and it's gonna potentially lead to some injuries. Most of the time, minor injuries and pain in your feet and lower legs can be, and even in your knees, patellofemoral tendonitis. Sometimes new shoes can eliminate that. I would recommend, if you haven't been injured, just get the same pair of shoes you got.
And buy a bunch. We've talked about this before, right? Because what do running companies like to do?
They change
Shoemakers
it up every year.
They like to change them up, and the shoe's not the same, right?
I would say my recommendation to anybody who's been running, if you've been running and you've been training and progressing your mileage normally, and then all of a sudden your feet or ankles or shins or whatever start to hurt, probably because your shoes are dead.
Yeah.
I mean, good chance. And I run to it all the time. That's the first thing I ask somebody when they say that they're having all of a sudden having knee pain, foot pain, ankle, whatever. I say, well, how old are your shoes? Yeah. And probably 70% of the time, they're like, oh yeah, I got these 2 years ago, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, and be cautious. Like, be cautious about the more like racing flats. They don't last as long.
No, and they put a lot more pressure on your calves, your Achilles, because they're zero. Most of them are zero drop, and so you're going to be on your forefoot more.
If the sole itself is thinner, it's not going to last as long. It's just not.
It's just less fun.
Like if something like a Hoka is really thick, so they've generally lasted a little bit longer, but they still get to the point where those soles are so compact that they're just not going to provide the cushion that they're supposed to, being a marshmallow pillow.
And I would recommend, wherever you live, go get fit at a run specialty shop. Every time you go get shoes, visit your local running store and buy from them. I mean, I think it's great. If you know exactly what you need, maybe and you're in a pinch and you got to order it off the internet, I can get that. But like, your body changes, your foot can change, and getting reevaluated each time, it's going to make a big difference in knowing yourself and in making sure you got fit properly.
And they're also going to know what the new shoes are, right?
Yeah.
We just mentioned how they change up the lineup, and you got new shoes coming out.
Right.
So here's what I was running in, and they've got the knowledge, that background knowledge, can save you the money you would save by buying online.
It's not much. It's really
they would
not
save
much.
you in you not having to do all the research and trying to. They'd save you in time of not having to do that research.
Yep.
All right, let's move. We're getting long. We're getting long with this one.
Then speed it up.
So we're going to speed it up. So racing. What are our thoughts on racing? What are mistakes we're seeing? Are people... well, I'm not even going to go too deep into this. I want you to tell me your thoughts on racing mistakes.
The mistake is racing too much.
That's the number one.
I mean, people will just race, and I get it. Racing is a blast, tons of fun, but like if you just race and race and race and race and race and never recover, like there's two things. You're never gonna recover from the high intensity efforts, or you'll eventually you will not have put any time into fatigue resistance because you're just run, like race. Your fatigue resistance diminishes, and then you're going to run up into a trouble. Or you'll find that you're just not running as fast because you don't have the ability to hold pace as long.
Right. Yeah, I mean...
That's it. Biggest mistake, racing too much?
Racing too much.
So
the fix, hide your credit card.
Yeah.
Save some money. Yeah. Don't race as much.
Don't race as much.
Yeah, if you look at if you put it all on a calendar and you're seeing that you're like, you're going 2 and 3 weeks in a row with a race that is going to take a lot out of you. It's one thing if you're racing 5Ks and then like on Sunday you can get your long run in or something like that. That's kind of one thing. But if you just keep hammering yourself and you never take a week off or a recovery week, you're eventually going to run into a problem.
Yeah.
And then you're going to wonder what the heck happened.
Yeah, you'll see the spike in fitness initially, and then that plateau or just completely falling off the cliff.
You'll race yourself into shape,
Yeah.
and then you'll race yourself into sitting on a couch.
All right, last thing we'll talk about here. A lot of people, especially people just getting into the sport of running, there's tons and tons of pre-built plans out there.
Oh, yes.
You can, a quick Google search will bring up a lot. There's some quality ones out there. What are mistakes we're seeing as far as those that are taking, these pre-built plans and now trying to use them as their training program?
I would say that's probably the biggest mistake people make with a pre-built plan. And there's a lot of good ones out there.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a lot of bad ones out there, but there are a lot of good ones out there. But what happens is people will get into a plan, and then something happens in their life, and they get off the rails, and then they have no clue how to adapt that plan for themselves to get back on the track.
Exactly.
And they run into an issue. So they'll get a week or two behind on their long run or whatever, and then they're going to immediately just try to follow the plan and go from, a 8-mile long run to a 12 or and that's just too big of a jump, where you were supposed to hit that
50%
8, 9,
jump.
11, and then hit the 12 or whatever. Like life got in the way. You just weren't sure how to adapt it. So I'll just stick to what it says. And now you've gotten yourself in trouble because you've gone to too much too soon, basically.
Exactly.
So that's the biggest mistake I'd see, is just people have no clue how to adapt a program if it doesn't happen perfectly.
Yeah.
No, I think that's 100% spot on. I mean, there's a ton of great plans out there if you're able to follow them to a T.
Sure.
The issue is
and my way for avoiding that for anybody listening is, if you get a pre-built plan and something goes off the rails for a week, usually like take the longest or hardest workouts in the week that it went off the rails and move those to the next week. You can do like the auxiliary stuff that's on the next week or whatever, but don't progress the longest or hardest stuff. Like, don't make that jump. Take it from the week that went crappy and move it to the next week. And let those follow you. And even if you don't get all the way to like the highest level long or hard workout, that's better than making that jump, and allowing that jump to happen. That probably will throw you into too much too soon.
No, for sure. And I guess the other thing I would throw into that, a lot of those plans are just based off mileage. And we just talked about what some of the issues with mileage can be. So just be very aware of what the training load is relative to mileage. If you go on vacation and you're going from a flat normal training to now you're incorporating a lot of hills, just be aware of that and what that's doing from a training load standpoint, and how big of a jump is that going to make from a time and intensity, and scale back if you need to. You don't have to hit that mileage necessarily.
Absolutely. I think that's all she wrote for today. We went basically.
We covered what, three mistakes, right?
3 little mistakes.
Three things.
Mistakes.
And a lot of these are if you made it all the way to the end and you're a cyclist, I commend you. We need to do one specifically just for cyclists, adding running as their cross training. We'll do that in the fall.
Yeah,
but essentially, rewind and listen to the Too Much Too Soon, and really focus on.
You can do the same on a lot of these for cycling.
Oh, for sure.
As well.
All right, we are at. I got it at 57.
All right, let's end this thing then.
Boom.
We appreciate you guys hanging out, watching, listening, and hopefully you got a lot out of it. And we will catch you guys next week.
Please weigh in on how you like the background.
Adios.
Peace.